Well, it all seemed to be going so well for Israel at the end of the last section, as they saw God's great work at power delivering them from slavery. And we're finally told they feared Yahweh and believed in him and in his servant Moses. And they sung that great song of praise. Surely we think they've turned a corner. But no. How long did their faith last? 3 days. 3 days after God's mighty rescue, they start grumbling about a lack of water. Unsurprisingly, God soon abundantly provides. But do they learn their lesson? No. And chapters 15 to 17 are basically one facepalm moment after another, as Israel constantly grumble and fail to believe that God will provide for them. And they even wonder whether they'd have been better off dying in Egypt, and ask if God is really with them at all. It's a pretty shocking response when you consider all the evidence they'd seen of God's care for them. So what's the lesson of these wilderness grumblings? Well, it's important to notice how God interprets what's going on, and we see that in chapter 16, verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for ye, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not." God is testing Israel to show whether or not they'll obey his law. And that's a reference to the law that he hasn't actually given them yet. We're about to see Israel given God's law at Mount Sinai in chapters 19 and following. But notice that here they're given one of the 10 commandments early, the commandment about keeping the Sabbath, as a kind of test case, like a bit of a trial run. Are Israel going to trust God enough to obey his law when he gives it to them? Well, clearly the answer is no. It's a test that they fail. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, when we think of how easily we grumble about what we don't have, and how often we struggle to trust that God will provide, well, these chapters uncomfortably expose us too, don't they? The persistence of Israel's faithless disobedience leaves us thinking that if there's any hope for people like us, well, it's not going to come from within ourselves. Our only chance is to hope in God, that he'll be gracious. So isn't it so encouraging that God displays so much gracious patience with Israel? Every act of wicked grumbling in these chapters is matched with a patient display of incredible generosity. From the 12 springs of water and 70 palms for shade, to the delicious honey wafer-like manna for food. And that grace, we know, would find its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus. In every one of the 4 Gospels, the story of the feeding of the 5,000 contains clear echoes to this episode in the wilderness in Exodus, with God providing manna. Jesus provides for his people just like Yahweh did. That's the point. Except John's Gospel actually takes that idea even further, because there Jesus says, "I am the bread of life." I'm the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and they died. This is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. See, Jesus says he himself is God's greatest provision. A far better provision than the manna, because feeding on him brings eternal life. Back in Exodus 16, verse 28, God posed a worrying rhetorical question to Israel. How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? That's worrying, because it's really quite similar to what he asked Pharaoh earlier in the book. How long will you refuse to obey me? But the Bible story shows us the answer to that question. How long? Until Jesus comes. Feed on him and we get forgiveness for our wicked faithlessness. Feed on him and we're given a whole new life and new hearts that can now trust and obey him. And so as those with new hearts, well, let's seek to put our grumbling to death now, seeing what a great provider we know God is for us. And let's rejoice in the goodness of his grace when we do still fail. And isn't it great that rejoicing in God is how the first half of this book ends? As Jethro, this Midianite priest, is converted. He hears the story from Moses of how Yahweh had mightily delivered Israel from Pharaoh, from all their hardships. And as Jethro responds, we think, yes, and finally someone has got it. And surely this is the right way for us to respond. Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, in that he delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord, Yahweh, is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people." I hope that's how the first half of the book of Exodus has left you thinking and feeling. Yahweh is a God who rescues, the great God above all gods. Blessed be the Lord.